Good morning. If morning is ever a good thing, it's probably never pleasant, but today on September 11th, instead of having a sacrifice of the innocent, as we've had in recent years and as we had in the Mountain Meadows Massacre, perhaps we can sacrifice on the altar of truth saints unscripted in their pattern of deception. So we're going to look at the first vision episode recently where Dave of Saints Unscripted seeks to normalize the fact that we've got multiple contradictory versions of the so-called first vision of Joseph Smith, and he'll try to normalize that because it's perfectly normal to have such an extraordinary experience and just not even remember how old you were or key details in it. Just kind of be like the Mormon God, never able to keep your story straight. But before we get into it, I want to take a look at quack using typical illuminated technique here, hiding it out in the open, putting something out in the open, and then mocking it, as he did with some of the discussion that has come out since, should we call her Dodger Girl or She Dodger, as Dave Norman likes to call her, kind of brought that into the discussion on this channel regarding quack basically being an MK Ultra asset and transgender at that. So quack is going to go ahead and acknowledge that before they start talking about these vicious trolls that comment on their channel and mock these poor innocent and truthful Latter-day Saints of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. Let's take a look. Okay, let's roll it.
People have mean comments about us.
Well, it's fine. All right, we're responding to some comments.
Your guys' favorites.
What? This is number 6.
The sixth time
Comment
we've done
response
this.
video number 6.
These are our favorites to film. These are so... Well, church doctrine is good too, but, these are pretty funny.
She just outed herself. She's just in here for the fame. We're just clout chasers, that's all we are. I also work for the CIA. I'm a low-level paid asset for the CIA.
And he's transgender.
And I'm transgender, and I'm a woman. Born a woman, CIA, and gay. Right? Those are the three.
You know what I've been getting a ton lately?
What?
Did he just flash a 666 when he finished that? I think he did. Well, how about that? I did have to comment on this. I mean, someone over there must be watching our channel. The discussion that She Dodger, as Dave Norman likes to call her, Dodger Girl, brought in regarding those things and the transgendering program, the MK Ultra program, etc., and quack's obvious feminine features and mannerisms. So the ability to do such a fine job of misrepresenting LDS history and normalizing things that are not okay. I had to comment also here, so let's have my comment. I commented twice. All right, the Dan Vogel disguise comes on so I can read. I'll start with the second one since it was my first. Great technique. Acknowledge real issues, then laugh at them as if they're not realistic. Rinse and repeat. Well, anyway, it's good to know you've been watching my channel. I suppose that your handlers, programmers, producers, probably wouldn't approve of you actually mentioning it. Well, they were involved in that, actually. So it was kind of a covered way for you to say, hey, I'm a big fan of you, Dodger Dave. Of your channel. I guess I had a little mess up there with the voice to text. I I just know you haven't been able to find your way to let me know. Till now, when I slip this in a way that makes it almost hidden in plain sight, if you know what I mean. As I throw some sixes. Yeah. I don't think he covered one eye and winked, but I was kidding about that. But yeah, I did throw sixes at the end, and I just put that in, not even realizing consciously that he did throw the Illuminati 666 after he said that. I just want to say that your eyebrows look fine, Mimi. Oh, now for the girl who is still 100% ungenetically modified girl. Yeah, the real girl. I just wanted to say that your eyebrows look just fine. We didn't hear that part. And your hat, I absolutely love your hat. It looks great on you. I was given one similar to that, which I thought I should use as a Joseph Smith Treasure Seeker costume hat in a video. But I think I left it in Utah. So disappointing. There may have been one video I did with Galactic Storyteller where I wore that hat for a while. Gonna have to check it out. Anyway, yours looks great on you. Beyond that, maybe you should consider doing your own channel. Hey, she does. Didn't know it. And get away from this Mr. Rogers level programming that we find here on 3 Victories for Satan. I mean, totally scripted sounding, unscripted Mormonism programming bots channel as it works to achieve the goals of NSA-style Strengthening Church Members Committee, to which the leaked presiding bishopric member Glenn L. Pace memo was made regarding what Bishop Pace considered to be a massive problem with the satanic ritual abuse and human sacrifice occurring on the Wasatch Front by temple recommend holders, including the offices of bishop, stake president, patriarch, members of the tabernacle choir, otherwise known as MOTAB, young women's and young men's leaders. Actually, the first thing he mentioned was young women's leaders, by the way, probably because it was mostly girls who were being sucked into these situations by young women's leaders. And the seemingly men's leaders, all of whom seemingly managed to go undetected by the magical discerning powers of bishops and stake presidents in those temple recommend interviews. I suppose next you'll put Quacku in girls' cheer uniform, embroidered Team MK, and give him some tall flags to perform for us. With his soulmate, Michelle Obama. So that was my first comment. I'm sure they'll love that one. And then the next one was regarding a comment that Quaku made when a Christian said the Book of Mormon was a bunch of BS, but that the Bible was proven fact. And Quaku made an example of how, if he said that he saw a flying rabbit that talked to him and it happened in Jerusalem, then it must be true because Jerusalem's a real place, which is the same kind of thing I say to these Christians. So I said, oh my God, did Quaku just agree? Yeah, the blasphemy was intended. Just agree with me on something? Just because Jerusalem exists, Christians pretend that the Bible is not a fairy tale, but that it's actual, real, proven history, and that Moses was real also, and led millions of people out of Egypt, despite the fact that their only cultural borrowings seem to come from the Canaanites and not the Egyptians. But now the Bible's true, every word of it, because Jesus and the flying white rabbit that Quaku mentioned, and Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy told me so. I mean, they bore their sacred witness. Please excuse me for being so irreverent. And Jesus was real. He's not just an allegorical representation of Titus Flavius. He's real, I tell you. Quaker loves to say things like I tell you. So the mockery is kind of a layered message I'm using. And sorry for the helicopter flying over. Jesus loves me, yes I know, because the Bible tells me so. That's kind of a little sing-song primary type thing that they do in Christian churches, in case you don't know. Yay! Once again, great technique. Do something honest occasionally so that people will find you believable. So, yeah. Spreading some thoughts there for the mentally crippled to watch these people. And now let's get back to today's feature presentation. Oh, not sons of perdition.
All right,
That's all
guys.
about me.
So repentance and forgiveness are...
Sorry. First vision.
If Latter-day Saint missionaries have ever chatted with you about our faith, they've probably told you about the prophet Joseph Smith and the vision he had of God the Father and Jesus Christ in the spring of 1820. We refer to this experience as Joseph Smith's first vision, and you can read what Joseph Smith said about it in our scriptures. But this recollection of the vision is not the only one. There are basically 4 first vision accounts that Joseph either wrote himself or that were recorded by a scribe. But here's the catch.
And actually, even LDS.org, I believe, mentions 9 of them. Dave.
The gist of each record is essentially the same. There is some variation when it comes to the details. And to some believers, and not...
No, that's complete bullshit. The gist of them is not the same at all. The motivation was entirely different as described. Details that are very important are different. And no, if I saw God the Eternal Father and Jesus Christ, I'd at least know how old I was.
Unbelievers, that's a little concerning.
A little, just a little.
If Joseph is telling the truth, shouldn't every record of his first vision be the same? Well, let's take a look.
Okay, so he's going to try to appear really reasonable about this and say, you know, as we look at this, how realistic is it for us to expect him to perfectly remember this after so long? And he hated writing so much that he just didn't write anything down for at least a dozen years. Yeah, okay. You gotta think about how much sense this shit makes. Sorry for the music.
I think the non-Latter-day Saint author Stephen Prothero said it best. Critics of Mormonism have delighted in the discrepancies between the canonical account and earlier renditions. Such complaints, however, are much ado about relatively nothing.
So we use a third-party reference there to give some feeling of credibility, and now, it's all about nothing. These are minor details. So what if he sees God and he can't remember, was I 14? Was I 15? Maybe I was 16. No. The whole reason I was there, I forgot God was there. It was just Jesus forgive me of my sins because I felt like shit because of my sins. I mean, no, there are huge differences. But Dishonest Dave, that sounds like Trump. Sorry. Is going to smooth it over for us. It's all about technique. Kind of like what your wife used to say when you got in an argument. Honey, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And she was right. Presentation makes a big difference.
A good lawyer or historian would expect to find contradictions or competing narratives written down years apart and decades after the event. And despite the contradictions, key elements abide. The first record we have of the first vision was written by Joseph Smith and Frederick G. Williams, probably in the summer of 1832, which would be like 12 years after the event actually happened. Now this leads me to an important point.
12 years. He waited 12 years when he saw God. Or Jesus. Yeah, I actually, only Jesus this time. He waited 12 years and he still screwed it up badly.
About Joseph Smith. He was not a fan of writing.
He didn't like
He called it a little narrow prison. His own wife said he wasn't good at it. Even most of Joseph Smith's personal journal was written down by a scribe. Anyway,
Anyway, just saying. That explains why it took him 12 years and still fuck it up. Oh, screw it up. Sorry, Mormons.
32 version is short.
Okay, that's an acronym for fornication under consent of the king, but it's been made to be nasty because anything sexual. Did I say sexual? The S word? Oh my God. It's nasty. It's irreverent even if you're married. But make those babies because they'll be future tithe payers.
Frederick wrote that Joseph was 16 at the time. A pillar of fire or light rests upon him. Joseph is filled with the...
Did he say fire or light, or did he say fire? Why did he say or light? Because the other one says light. So we just throw that in almost subliminally to blend it, to make it sound like it's the same thing. But it's not.
Spirit of God, and wrote, "The Lord opened the heavens upon me, and I saw the Lord. The Lord forgives him of his sins and says the world has strayed from the gospel." Next, we have the 1835 account. Now, this is an...
Next, so we just kind of blow right past that. Well, he will mention that the links are listed in the description to read these, or to the church's webpage that actually does have as links the full content of each of these, I believe 9 of them, but he's only going to highlight 4, or act like 4 exist, and then say, well, I said that were either written by Joseph Smith, or some little quid pro quo, or something to make it so he wasn't being completely dishonest, to leave out the fact that actually there were 9. So at any rate, he's going to act like, oh, that just kind of covers that. It's all we need to look at. Nothing more to look at here. These aren't the droids you're looking for. But as a matter of fact, although they tried to come across with this, hey, we've got this full disclosure going on, we've got the links, they know that most people will be too lazy to read the entire version, as long as they've got this little summary where the church brings out some similarities in them and makes it sound like Joseph Smith was just emphasizing a particular aspect of the vision for a particular audience. But that is completely dishonest. And so this is a technique we're using, and they depend on your laziness. Don't be lazy. Read the whole thing. When you do, you'll see that Joseph Smith's manner of language, he was so illiterate. Even with a scribe, helping in 1832, that he sounds like it's a, reformed hillbilly is what he spoke. And it needs a lot more reforming. He was not capable of putting together much that sounded like it made any sense to anyone with the most rudimentary education. At least that's my opinion. Read it yourselves and see how dissimilar the narrative is in each of these renditions of a so-called first vision. And as we know, the Father and the Son business wasn't a part of LDS theology for quite some time, which goes along perfectly with the fact that the Book of Mormon doesn't teach the Father and the Son being distinct and separate individuals, and the theology changed 3 times. It changed. It was what we had in the Book of Mormon, then what we had in Lecture 5 and the Lectures on Faith. And then we had God the Father having a physical resurrected body and kind of catching up to Jesus in the new Mormon theology of eternal progression. So it doesn't work well to have that theology and then have a first vision like what we had from the 1832, which doesn't include God the Father as a separate individual. He invented that vision about the same time, or introduced it at the same time as we're getting this new doctrine after the King Follett discourse and such. Okay, continuing.
Interesting one. A guy who introduces himself as Joshua the Jewish minister meets with Joseph, and Joseph tells him about his vision. Meanwhile, Joseph's scribe, Warren Parrish, is writing everything down. In this retelling, Joseph says he's about 14 years old at the time of the vision. He talks about an encounter with evil he had just before the vision. There's the pillar of light, 2 personages appear to him. Once again, his sins are forgiven. He's told that Jesus is the Christ, and he sees many angels in this vision. Next, we have the 1838 version. This is the one canonized in the Pearl of Great Price. It was written for a general audience for the purpose of being published. He gives more detail in this account than any others. He talks about the encounter with evil, the pillar of light, God the Father, and Jesus Christ. His sins are forgiven, and he's told the world has strayed from the gospel. but no mention of seeing any other angels in his vision. The last version is from an 1842 letter to a newspaper editor named John Wentworth. We're not sure if Joseph actually wrote this account, but in any case, he signed off on it. We also know that this account borrows a lot of language used by an apostle named Orson Pratt in a pamphlet published about Joseph Smith in 1840 in Scotland, so it's not wholly an original retelling. But in this version, he once again sees two personages surrounded by brilliant light. He's told not to join any church and that the fullness of the gospel would soon be revealed to him. He omits his encounter with evil here, doesn't talk about other angels or his sins being forgiven. If you want to read any of these different accounts, check out the links in the description. The church has published all of them. Keep in mind, though, that there's a difference between contradictions and omissions. For example, according to the 1832 account, Joseph was 15 or 16 years old. In other accounts, he's 14. Obviously, yes, that's a contradiction. He can't be 14 and 16 at the same time. Somebody is obviously mistaken here. But
okay, so we're going to go ahead and acknowledge that there's a problem there, but hey, somebody is mistaken. Somebody? We have direct responsibility here on Joseph Smith. Either he's writing these or he is with Warren Parrish, for instance, he's got his scribe right there, taking things down. Hey, I'm dictating this, write this down, and I'm sure he's going to review it before he publishes it. So, somebody was wrong? Perhaps Joseph Smith didn't plan on all of them being available for us to view. The fact that he kept changing things until he got a story that he felt he was comfortable with publishing, or contradicted things that he said in other things that he did publish. For instance, The Times and Seasons, the History of the Church, about 1835, that he was in charge of editing and that he had help of, I believe it was Oliver Cowdery in publishing, wherein Cowdery stated that Joseph Smith, in his 1823 prayer, which we call the Visitation of Moroni, was seeking to know if a supreme being even existed. Obviously, this wouldn't be the case if he had had such a vision in 1823 and 1820, as we are taught. But, of course, that hadn't actually been invented yet until 1838.
Missions are different. Just because Joseph talks about seeing angels in one account but doesn't mention them in another doesn't mean they weren't there. It just means he didn't talk about them. In the short 1832 account, this is up for...
Still, if you're taking the time to have something written down that you're dictating, or even you're sharing this, this is a major experience. You're not going to make these kinds of changes. You're not going to invent angels in one time and another time you don't. God the Father introduces his son Jesus Christ in the official version. 1832, he's not even present. And Joe isn't there for the same reasons. Furthermore, we're told that Joseph went for the purpose of finding out which church he should join. And he further states in that 1838, published in 1842, which you've got in the Pearl of Great Price, this statement that it had never entered into his mind that they could all be wrong. Nevertheless, in 1832, he states clearly that he already knew that they were all wrong, that there was no true church on the earth. Yeah.
Debate, but it appears Joseph only talks about seeing one personage, Jesus Christ. In the other accounts, he talks about two personages, God the Father and Jesus Christ. But just because he doesn't mention God the Father in the 1832 account doesn't mean God the Father wasn't there. And considering God the Father's
Considering his minimal role, I mean, how could he even remember that he just saw God? Am I acting like Jacqueline Glenn?
role in even the most detailed account, I'm not bothered Joseph doesn't mention him in the short 1832
Not bothered at all.
In the 1832 account, Joseph is worried about his sins. In the 1842 account, he's worried about which church he's going to join. So which is it? Well,
He's worried about, except for the fact is he's supposed to be describing one distinct and particular experience. And so it's not about in the 1832 or in the 1838. It's about if it really happened, he would have been focused on what he was focused on. And like I said, in the 1832, which Dave just omits, by the way, he already was certain that there was no one true church on the earth. And joining a particular church was not listed as an issue at all there. In fact, the opposite was mentioned. So, no, that's a major contradiction. And somehow, Dave, in all his objectivity, to show us what a fair and honest and just a Fox News guy he is, fair and balanced, omits this contradiction.
35 account harmonizes both of these motivations. In summary, antagonists of Joseph Smith believe these differences are evidence that he just made the whole thing up. And you're certainly free.
You're free to be an antagonist if you want to be one of them. An antagonist, a hater.
To believe that if you wish. Personally, I agree with Professor Prothero. It's much ado about nothing.
I agree with Professor Prothero. Why? And why do we mention his title again? Because that's giving credence to him. That's giving authority in our minds, at least subconsciously, to the man. It's you know? It's got to be true. It's a professor, for God's sakes. I mean, this is a third-party endorsement. It's not even from me. Don't listen to me. Listen to him. Kind of listen to me. Yeah. So he's using a lot of technique. He's using a lot of technique. And just because some guy has a title of professor doesn't make what he says more important than what anybody else says. It's not much to do about nothing at all. If you read the accounts, you shall see. Oh, and Dave missed a few things, and we're going to go over that. We're going to go to my website, my webpage on the First Vision, and I think, in addition to noting that I've got some videos on it that you can watch, I'll probably read a bit of what I said on there so that, you can just listen like you do on videos, which is why I made videos, because not everybody's going to take the time to study and read, and quite frankly, you may have more things to do. So this is kind of like multitasking made easy, right? Kind of like I did when I worked for the church. Throw those cassettes on, I invested in a portable cassette player that I could just hook on my belt, put the headsets on, and did my mind-numbing work in the LDS chapel while I listened to all those conference talks and BYU devotionals and scriptures on tape and all that stuff so that I could be prepared to save my family from the devil and make sure we're all resurrected on our own Calabian world in the future. Or something like that.
I think this is just a case of a guy telling a multifaceted and deeply personal story to different people for different purposes in different contexts and in different decades. Interestingly,
I think this guy should be selling Kirby vacuums.
As kind of a brief aside, we see the same kind of differences in the multiple accounts of Paul's vision of the Savior on the road to Damascus.
Now, maybe Robert Allen's multiple streams of income seminars. That would probably be better.
Yes. As contexts change, Paul presents his story slightly differently, and that's fine. As Prothero said, it's to be expected. Now, if you want to dive deeper into Paul's accounts, I'll leave
a link. Well, guess what? Here's your little link. Paul, if he ever existed, maybe he was Apollinos, absolutely did contradict himself completely within that story of saying he saw the Lord. First of all, the Lord has nothing to do with the Jesus Christ story that was invented after this. You know, Paul's thing was like published in like 52 AD, and the Gospels didn't come out for quite some time after that. So he's probably referring to the mythological Jewish angel Jesus. And does he? Yeah, Jesus, whom thou persecutest. He doesn't say Jesus Christ. And as a matter of fact, Paul says that in one he saw a light but didn't hear diddly squat. In the other one, he says he heard a voice but he didn't see anything. Or it's very close to that. Not only does this matter when Dave says it doesn't, but it matters so much that there was an LDS missionary help book called The Missionary Pal, which I happen to have since I ran the church bookstore and used it for myself as a stake missionary, which emphasized how important this very fact was, showing us how defective the Bible is. Because obviously it must be screwed up heavily for Paul to make up, two different versions that contradict each other directly. So what's evidence that the LDS Church needs the inspiration of a latter-day prophet because our scriptures are all screwed up in one version of LDS propaganda here is perfectly acceptable, according to Dave and every other authority that he wants to use as a third-party reference. Everything's smoothed over, and we know it's totally fine that Joseph couldn't get his story straight. Right?
A link in the description so you can do that, but the point is, if you don't have a problem with Paul, you shouldn't have a problem with Joseph.
I got a problem with both of them because they're both full of it, Dave. And so are you. And so now we're going to delve into the website a little bit where I've got some more detail. So here we go. Ooh. And let's just click right in. Did I clear that? Okay, so I'll just click here. And we'll click into that page, which is the first vision. And here we go. Now we're going to pause. I'm going to put on my headset because I'm going to be scrolling a little bit. And I think that this will avoid you having to listen to little squeaky noises on the screen. Because I care about all you folks who have complained about the horrible sounds on some of the videos where I've had to do things that made noises like that. So here we go. Headset's going on. Hoping you're hearing this all right. If it's muted, I'll probably be forced to commit suicide. So this is on Mormon Truth Videos Gospel Topics Hub. Easily Googled. And this is called The Angel and Joseph Smith's First 1823 First Vision. Because that's the Moroni vision that he always claimed until about 1842 when this was published. Or at least 1838, when it was written down. That was the first vision, because there was no first vision about Jesus. Okay, I need to get rid of myself here so I can read. So let me turn on a camera or something, which will cancel that program. Goodbye. All right. That just is a little trick for getting rid of that aspect of the Mobizen program. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. The first vision that Joseph's family and friends appear to be unaware of. Does the first vision survive the fact-checking of LDS history? Let's see. When we review Joseph Smith's statements, or those of his family and associates, we find known recorded events such as the death of his brother Alvin in late 1823, which in fact was the impetus for the Smith family search for solace in religion. Okay, so that's important because Joseph Smith said that happened before. What he says is that his family joined the Presbyterian Church before he had his first vision. And that actually happened after Alvin died in 1823. So why did he say that? Because he hadn't made the shit up yet. That's why. Okay. Entering the time period of the well-documented Christian revivals, which were held in the Manchester and Palmyra area, as published in their local newspapers for the years 1824 and 1825, which, unlike the years intervening between the 1816 and 1817 revivals, showed historical fingerprints in the local newspapers and other publications, as well as consistency in the corresponding expected increases in membership associated with these revivals in the various local denominations of the Methodist, Presbyterian, and Baptist congregations, according to the records kept by the respective churches, thus differing with the interim period where membership in the 1820 ranged from minimal increase to actual net loss in those locally preeminent three sects, which Joseph Smith, of course, said was, such the big deal going on just prior to this first vision, which obviously didn't happen. And history is verifying that. In fact, Joseph Smith's contradictions of his own narrative statements and revelations reflect the inconsistency of a fabricated story, even before we get to the evidence that his apostles and family, who obviously never heard of such an event, as well as what we call the first vision, in which the characters of God the Father and Jesus Christ are represented to have appeared to a 14-year-old boy on the occasion of his first attempt to pray vocally, as he is stated to have claimed in the Joseph Smith history section in the Pearl of Great Price in your scriptures. As far as contradicting the word of God goes, we only need turn to the scriptures as revealed to Joseph Smith in order to see the following verse from Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, verse 21 and verses 22, stating, "And without the ordinances thereof and the authority of the priesthood, the power of godliness is not manifest unto men in the flesh. For without this," meaning the priesthood, "no man can see the face of God, even the Father, and live." Okay, so according to his own doctrine, he couldn't have seen God the Father and lived. Then again, Joseph graced us with this revelation at the fall equinox of 1832, long before he apparently decided he had had a vision with God the Father and Jesus Christ as separate and distinct individuals. This story first appears to have been written in 1838, but not published until 1842 in church periodicals. Additionally, we see that such information also seems to have not been noticed by Joseph's associates in the Quorum of the 12 either, as we will see in multiple statements made by apostles and presidents of the church who emphatically stated that Joseph Smith was visited by an angel rather than God in the answer to his prayers as to which church he should associate with. Historical documentation relative to the first vision claims also include not only Joseph Smith slipping up and mentioning his little sister having been born a couple of years prior to their moving to Manchester, who we know was born in the summer of 1821, thus precluding Joseph managing to have such an experience before 1823 in this location, but also the confirmation of tax records corresponding to an 1822 move incurring road taxes and real property tax assessment in 1823, indicating the building of a home on their newly acquired 100-acre property in Manchester. Brigham Young stated regarding Joseph's initial revelatory claim that the Lord did not come with the armies of heaven, but he did send his angel to this same obscure person, Joseph Smith Jr., who afterwards became a prophet, seer, and revelator. and informed him that he should not join any of the religious sects of the day, for they were all wrong. Reference Journal of Discourses, Volume 2, 1855, page 171. So Brigham Young didn't have any belief that Joseph Smith had this first vision. There is no reason to believe Joseph Smith was persecuted and that he even spoke of this, because there's no record of him ever mentioning it before writing something down in 1832 about a vision that doesn't correspond to the story we're told of a God the Father, Jesus Christ vision. Continuing. Later in life, we again have Brigham Young speaking on the matter, where he starts with the question, do we believe that the Lord sent his messengers to Joseph Smith and commanded him to refrain from joining any Christian church and to refrain from the wickedness he saw in the churches, and finally delivered to him a message informing him that the Lord was about to establish his kingdom on the earth and led him on step by step until he gave him the revelation concerning the plates? Yes, this is all correct. Next, reference Brigham Young, 1874, Journal of Discourses, Volume 18, page 239. John Taylor, third president of the church, stated, how was it and which was right? None of them was right, just as it was when the prophet Joseph asked the angel which of the sects was right, that he might join it. The answer was that none of them are right. None of them? No, we will not stop to argue that question. The angel merely told him to join none of them, that none of them were right. Reference Journal of Discourses, meaning this is a speech delivered at General Conference, which is supposed to be scripture in LDS doctrine. Next, the fourth president of the church, who was also an apostle to Joseph Smith, stated, and this is Wilford Woodruff, stated, the same organization and gospel that Christ died for is again established in this generation. Christ died for an organization? I don't even see that in the story in the New Testament. Is established in this generation. How did it come? By the ministering of an holy angel from God out of heaven, who held converse with man and revealed unto him the darkness that enveloped the world. He told him the gospel was not among men, and that there was not a true organization of his kingdom in the world. Joseph was strengthened by the Spirit and power of God and wasn't able to listen to the teachings of the angel. The man to whom the angel appeared obey the Gospel Reference Journal of Discourses. So once again, Wilford Woodruff here is telling us that this critical information that we are told came to Joseph Smith in a visitation where God the Father introduced Jesus Christ, who told him, that to not join any of these churches. All of these future apostles and prophets say that that's not how it happened, but that an angel came to Joseph Smith, not God the Father. Apostle Heber C. Kimball said, do you suppose that God in person called upon Joseph Smith, our prophet? God called upon him, but God did not come himself and call, but he sent Peter to do it. Do you not see? He sent Peter and sent Moroni to Joseph and told him that he had got the plates. Speaking in Reformed hillbilly. Okay, so Heber C. Kimball, he was first presidency to Brigham Young and an apostle, also has a story that is completely different from what Joseph Smith is telling us in this 1842 business, which wasn't canonized in LDS scripture. It was for a long, long time after this. So it was in some periodical that these guys hadn't bothered to read, and evidently Joe never told them about this stuff. This wasn't part of the narrative of Mormonism at all. Orson Pratt stated, quote, By and by, an obscure individual, a young man, rose up in the midst of all Christendom, proclaimed the startling news that God had sent an angel to him. This young man, some 4 years afterwards, was visited again by a holy angel. Okay, and that's Orson Pratt speaking in 1869 at General Conference. It's in the Journal of Discourses, volume 13, pages 65 and 66. But yet there's more. Apostle George A. Smith said of Joseph Smith that he went humbly before the Lord and inquired of him. And the Lord answered his prayer and revealed to Joseph by the ministration of angels the true condition of the religious world when the holy angel appeared to Joseph. When the holy angel appeared, Joseph inquired which of all the denominations was right and which he should join, and was told they were all wrong. Reference, President George A. Smith, Journal of Discourses, 1863, volume, page 12, page 334. Okay, once again, this time after time, there's nothing in these things indicating that there was a God the Father, Jesus Christ visitation, and they're teaching something completely different even in 1869 in General Conference. As Joseph Smith tried to move the new version of the first vision dictated in 1838 back to 1820 as an occurrence predating his well-publicized 1823 claims regarding guidance from the spiritual world in being in locating golden plates in the hill Cumorah, he also placed known events anachronistic to their actual occurrence within his narrative, such as members of his family joining the Presbyterian faith, which he states in the canonized Joseph Smith history. Okay, I want to have preceded his first vision. Looks like I did some voice to text I didn't catch the errors on. It would have that preceded his first vision, whereas it is well documented that his family joined after the death of Alban, which occurred in November of 1823. In addition to testimonies from family members, including his brother William, editorializing upon why Joseph Smith Sr. would not join the Presbyterian Church due to his dislike of the Presbyterian minister for inferring at Alban's funeral, which he officiated at, that Alban would be damned to hell, since he was not a baptized Christian, or words to that effect, which of course places us after Alban's 1823 death in our narrative when we look at the multiple testimonies of Joseph's younger brother William Smith given over his lifetime. He generally places Joseph's interest in religion kindling around 1823, inventions, revivals, being involved in, I can't believe all these mistakes I got here, for hopeful converts to get a religion, although historical records show 1824 and 1825 as corroborating religious revivals in the area, and even making William's testimony appear to be a year or so earlier than possible. We, however, in no case find William ever supporting an 1820 occasion for Joseph Smith even beginning to seek religion, much less having the vision written in 1838 describing his father and son visitation, which he apparently manages to survive despite the word of the Lord stating that it was impossible in his 1832 Revelation section 84. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to comment. So William is saying that Joseph was a potential hopeful convert of another church in these 1823 to 1825 revivals. Okay, or 1824 and 1825, but he places in 1823
in his narrative. He obviously wouldn't be a hopeful convert of another church if he'd had that vision and Jesus appeared to him with God, his Father, in 1820 and said, don't you even think about joining any of these other churches, or go, whatever. Anyway, the facts when reviewed are so self-evident that even Professor of History at Brigham Young University, Marvin Hill, has stated that during the revivals of 1824 is where Lucy Mack appeared to have joined the Presbyterian Church, and where he also states that she remained an active member until the year 1828, as recorded in the First Vision Controversy published in Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought. So, harmonizing 4 to 9 stories of something that his apostles say never even happened is beyond being reasonable. The contradictions come one after another. The anachronisms come one after another. It's just impossible to reconcile this to what the church tells us is the case, or that we are led by honest individuals and an unchanging, all-knowing God in the LDS Church. I'm Dodger Dave, and I don't pay tithing to these MFers anymore. Like, subscribe, share. Have a great day.